What's up, everyone, and welcome down to another episode of Zetro's Toxic Vault. And we have another great guest with us today. Actually, he had just finished. Well, I don't know if you just finished, but it's finished, so I saw it anyway. It's called Bay Area Godfathers, Part 1, right?
Yep.
And we're here with Bob Nalbandian.
Correct.
And you have you're like the brainchild of this, kind of, but you've had a lot of help from other memorable Bay Area people that we've had here, good friends of ours.
Absolutely.
And good friends of the show. You've done other documentaries before.
Yes.
You've done some stuff from the LA scene, but is this the first thing you've done for the Bay Area?
Yeah. We started this back in, about 2011, 2012, and a friend of mine, who you may know, Joe Floyd, he played in the great LA metal band Warrior, Fighting for the Earth, great classic album from the 80s, and a great producer. He's produced a lot of bands, and he was toying the idea with his partner, Warren Croyle, who's the executive producer of the Inside Metal titles, about doing a kind of like a LA metal history, documentary. And Joe is going to produce, and Joe's like, I got to get Bob. He'll be perfect. So he asked if I'd like to be involved, and I said, sure, man. In what capacity? He goes, I want you to direct it. I'm like, I've never directed a movie before, but yeah, we'll give it a shot. And it just came to fruition from, and there wasn't really a plan to do it as a series. We just started filming, and it was kind of my idea. I said, well, let's go back pre-MTV, because that MTV era has been told, a lot of it. So let's go from the late 70s. There was so much in the LA scene. There was a club called the Starwood, which you probably heard of, and the Van Halen era, and of course Quiet Riot with Randy Rhoads, and all these bands from that era that never got any notoriety, but they were selling out, man. They were packing 700-800 people in these clubs, and I said, let's start out with that era and kind of go from there. And we just started getting interviews after interviews, and how the Bay Area scene kind of happened is we, I was living in LA at the time, and we were interviewing a lot of the, we had so much footage, we had to kind of cut it into different movies. And then we had to cut each into two parts because it became so long. But we were doing, I said, let's do something on the LA thrash scene, because that's hasn't really been told as much. It's all about, when people think Los Angeles, they think glam and hair metal, but there was a great thrash scene in LA, and a lot of those bands like Exodus played on the outskirts, like Fender's Ballroom or the Olympic Auditorium.
I love the Olympic Ballroom.
Great places, but it was kind of not really recognized. So I said, let's do something there. And when I was doing that, we were interviewing a lot of members from Dave Lombardo to David Ellefson to Lars, and of course, Dave Meniketti from Y&T. And they were also talking about the Bay Area, and we had some footage of the Bay Area. I said, well, this makes sense. Let's do something on the Bay Area scene. And, being from LA, I wanted to get true Bay Area people that grew up in that era. So hence I got John Stranaski, who I've known since the early 80s. I was doing a fanzine called The Headbanger when he started Metal Rendezvous, and I knew Ron Quintana. He graciously helped out and given us a lot of flyers and that kind of stuff. And then Danny Shipman I had worked with another movie I had actually done for Cleopatra called Band vs. Brand, which was a real fun movie. And Danny edited that with the help of Hugh and the Reality Check team. So, and I knew Danny had all this great footage, and that's always the hardest part, is getting authorized footage to use in the movie. And with the footage and everything he had, it was obvious to make them co-producers on the project, and they just did a fantastic job, and they helped getting interviews. Danny got a lot of the interviews, like the one we did with you and Tom, and John hooked me up with so many different people that I wasn't aware of. So, and we really wanted to get the whole Bay Area scene, not just the thrash. So we tried to get a very diverse genre of metal. So
yeah, well, I've actually watched. You can see it now, right? People can see.
Yeah.
Part 1, and I watched it over the weekend, and what I loved about it is there was not just certain guys you talked to. You talked to everybody. I mean, you talked to guys. I was like, I remember DAMMAJ. You know what I mean? I remember, and those guys, I haven't heard that name in years, you know. What I loved about the movie is that so many different people from the scene that I forgot existed, like the guys from DAMMAJ. I mean, how did you dig that up? And I mean, just to see Pete Marrino and just people like that. And I mean, it was great to see Dave, because Dave Meniketti doesn't do a lot of interviews. True. And to see Dave do that interview, it just brought, God, a lot of the footage brought me back. A lot of the old flyers and stuff with Lars rocking on it just blew me away. How long did it take to get this one together?
Well, this one came across pretty quick. You know, we had a lot of the interviews filmed in LA, like the Dave Meniketti, and you know, we already had Lars and a lot of the LA people filmed. And then when I came up here, between Danny, myself, and John Stranansky, John knew the DAMMAJ guys. He actually produced their album, and it was great to get a perspective from a band coming over from England, you know, and you know, in the early in 1980, and you know, getting lumped into the Bay Area scene. And you know, we got a lot of you know, Mike Varney from Shrapnel, so we didn't want just the bands. We, you know, Bob Gamber and Bill Burkhardt. We got the very last interview of Bill Burkhardt before he sadly passed away. And you know, I and even when I was in LA, I knew, because I had my fanzine, The Headbanger, and I would sell them, you know, in the early '80s to these record stores. I knew the Record Vault and the Record Exchange, so I knew all these guys even back then. And John had the contacts to them. I was like, yes, you know, we got to get. So it actually came together pretty quick. You know, John just started making calls. He's in Dallas now. He flew out here 2 or 3 times. We got together, did the interviews. We did like Pete Marrino and Mike Varney in Vegas. You know, Mike's living in Vegas, as is Pete. And I took a trip out to Vegas and interviewed those guys. And, you know, we just kind of made a list of people, and everyone was like totally willing. And it came together, you know, surprisingly quick. We actually had the movie done back in January. We kind of did a little debut at the Heavy Metal Awards show, the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame that Pat Gesualdo does, and during the NAMM show. And you know, we were planning on doing a bunch of screenings in the Bay Area and a few other places. Of course, with COVID, we had to cancel all those. So we were kind of sitting on it for a few months. But the movie actually came together very quick, and with the help of John and Danny with his great editing skills, and he was so quick on it. It just boom. It was. I think it was one of the quickest titles that actually came together.
We're going to take a look at some of this right now. Wayne's going to play some footage of this, just some quick blurts of Godfathers of the Bay Area, and then when we come back, we'll talk about where we're going to be able to get this and where you guys can go see this. This is definitely a true Bay Area, not just thrash. It's all about hard rock and everything that goes on. So check this out.
Right on.
Back then, it was like we were all together as one. But it was just like, oh my God, there are people here like us. There are people here that look like us, that think like us, that smell like us.
There was much more of a sense of community about it all, you know, and a support within the bands for each other. The scene that was in San Francisco is just maniacal and crazy as it was. This scene started to spread everywhere else.
We played Ruthie's Inn, which is a big thrash place, and Legacy played there with Alex Skolnick was in the band, and we rocked that show. I mean, it was the best show Hawaii ever had.
There were so many styles of music that were just flowing through all of these types of clubs. We truly stuck out.
Bodies were just flying everywhere. It's like, wow, this is amazing, you know. I felt very much at home. I felt welcomed.
But we didn't really have, you know, a super shredder, you know, in heavy metal at that point in time.
When I saw the Metallica thing, that was a big eye-opener. I was like, wow, we're onto something here. This is something's happening, you know?
They had something special. It was rebellious, and there was nothing like it.
Metal was just getting just insane in early '83. It was just the kids. Everybody was talking about Metallica coming out.
Every time I went to your shows, it was all dudes with like spike collars, sweating like I am right now. You know what I mean? Like,
it seemed like there was no girls in their audience at all. It was, you go to shows, a bunch of dudes in leather jackets. It's like, who wants to do this?
It was all like kind of a macho thing, and so then if you kind of were makeup wearing dude, you were like a poser.
You didn't go to an Exodus show with the peroxide hair pumped up like that. You just didn't do it because he'd single you out and go, I need you to kill him right now. And he'd go, kill. Totally killer. Loved that. I mean, I get goosebumps watching that every time.
Oh, cool, man. I'm so glad you liked it.
I do. I'm sure the viewers are going to love it as well. Tell us where, Bob, where we go, and I'll put the graphic up here. Tell us where we can see us, or where anybody can go see this right now if they wanted.
Well, you could get it. It is on DVD, and you could get the DVD at Amazon or Walmart.com or any place that sells records. Still, any record store, support your local record store. They should have it.
Great.
And it is streaming on Amazon Prime, on Vudu, on iTunes or Apple Movies, whatever they call that now, and Google Play, YouTube. I believe it's available for $3.99 on YouTube, and a few other digital formats. I know it just went on to cable pay-per-view, so it's available out there. Just look it up on your favorite digital format, and hopefully it'll be
because we'll have people from all over the world watch this show, and they may not have heard it. So that's why any outlet you can get, if you have anywhere. You're at Europe, South America, anywhere like that, try to look at the streaming. Now, this is part one.
Part one, yeah.
Which after part one, I was like, I like wiped my brow, man. I was totally sweat. I was like, wow. And there's a part two. How are you going to kill us with a part two? Talk about that.
Part two, I just found out is going to come out in March. We want to separate it so people know they're different movies.
Finished.
It's done. Oh yeah. They're both done, both of them, and it's basically like one continuous 3.5 hour movie we cut into 2 movies. So it pretty much continues where this left off, but it gets a little bit more into the grit and the debauchery, and it gets into a lot of the individual bands like Testament and Exodus and Y&T and Metallica, and talks about that, and really more it's just a little raunchier than the debut, but it's a little bit
than the part one.
Yeah,
so
it's a fun.
You sucked everybody in with part one, and then part two, it's just going to get
exactly.
You finish everybody off.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, it came out really good. It flows real good. If you see, I recommend you definitely watch part one first, and then you'll really dig part two. But a lot of people say, you only had 1 or 2 quotes from this guy or this guy. I go, well. You got
a million quotes from everybody. Yeah. How you even fit us all in there? I want to talk. I know this is what we're here to try to pump this, but I want to talk about the other ones that are finished as well. Let's talk about you have three.
Yeah, the first one is called. They're all under the Inside Metal moniker, and first one is the Pioneers of LA Hard Rock and Metal, which is about, as I mentioned, the early LA scene. And I was a little bit too young. I mean, I did catch a lot of those bands, but I was a little too young.
So what era are you talking about,
We're
Bob?
talking really it's
77,
yeah,
81.
77. We say it goes from 75s because we talk about bands like Detective and a few of those bands, but it's like 76, 77 to 81. And it really captures on the pre-MTV era. So we get into Van Halen a lot, and there were bands like Snow and A La Carte and Smile and Stormer and Greg Leon Invasion. And, it really talks about how these bands formed. Like, Dawkins, he was in Airborne. George Lynch was in a band called Exciter, who were real big. Exciter with an X in LA. And, Joey Vera from Armored Saint was in a band with Tommy Lee and Greg Leon way back in the day, the Greg Leon Invasion. So it kind of tells a little bit how these people develop, and a lot of things that people don't know because it was never really, talked about, or, like I said, it was pre-MTV. So it really kind of shows the source and shows how long these bands have been playing. And as you know, just like in the Bay Area, like Y&T, a lot of people don't know they were around since 74. It's Yesterday and Today.
What is Yesterday and Today, right?
Yeah, and these bands have been really, playing the club circuit. It wasn't like people think they just instantly got signed. I mean, these bands really worked for it, and we really wanted to give props to a lot of these bands that, maybe didn't make it. But, there were bands like Snow that had Carlos Cavazo, pre-Quiet Riot, and he was, they were a great band, man. They packed all the clubs. We used to see them a lot. So, that was kind of cool that we did that. And then the second title is The LA Metal Scene Explodes, and that's basically when the scene exploded. And
So 81 to 84, 85,
exactly,
something like that.
Yeah, to 86, I think
86,
we did it.
actually.
And
yeah.
we kind of purposely didn't want to get into the latter 80s, the real hair metal movement, because that's when, you know, a lot of bands came to LA to make it. And
well, like Poison didn't even really come out till 86 or 87,
exactly.
really. But there
And they
was
were
so
from
much.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, right.
Or
They came. That was a
Pennsylvania.
perfect warrant too. That
Right,
was the
right.
same. You know, well, like you said, people coming to LA to try to make it, but there was already, you know, well-grounded bands, like you said, Quite Right with Randy Rhoads in it, you know.
Sure.
And
a lot of those bands too, you know.
Early Wasp.
We cover. You know, we got Chris Holmes and Randy Piper.
Oh, Randy
there.
Piper, Tony Richards on
Yeah,
drums.
we couldn't find Tony, but yeah.
Where is
that
Tony Richards?
He's around. I heard an
Is he?
interview with him recently.
Really?
It was good. I was actually working with this band Max Havoc that Tony Richards was a part of, and dude, that guy's a monster drummer. I used to see him, again, showing the formation of how bands form. He used to be in Dante Fox, which turned into Great White. It was Tony Richards, and I don't know if you remember this guy, Don Costa, who everyone talks about, the guy that had the cheese grater. He was an Aussie for a minute. Yeah, he played with Don Costa, M80. He had a band.
Oh, yeah, I do remember
Crazy
that.
psycho guy, but hell of a bass player and showman, and he used to cut his knuckles and blood would go out in the
Lovely.
audience. So a lot of fun stuff, but yeah, that was the early scene, and LA metal scene explodes. You know, we talk about Malice, you know, Leather Wolf, a lot of bands that people don't remember now.
I
Racer
remember
X,
all of those bands.
You know,
Omen.
We'll talk about Savage Grace a bit.
Yeah, Savage Grace.
I don't know
Wow.
if we didn't unfortunately interview anyone from that band, but a lot of other bands that
Abattoir.
Abattoir. Juan
Yeah.
Garcia's in it, who was the original guitar player of Abattoir.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's fun stuff, man. And I lived that era. I was in that scene in LA, and I just remember how cool it was. And again, we didn't want to concentrate on just the hair bands, so we got a lot of different kind of stuff. And then the rise of LA thrash metal, as I mentioned, is, you know, kind of the LA thrash metal, and that thrash and you know, we got Abattoir and, you know, bands like that in there as well. And we talked to like Stephen Craig, the original Slayer manager, and you know, it's fun. It tells, you know, a story that a lot of people may not have known about that LA scene, because, you know, it was kind of an underground scene.
Sure was.
What was it? Balboa Theater. Mike
I
Muir
love the
used to do
Balboa.
a lot of.
I love the Balboa.
Those shows were insane.
They
I went
were
to a couple
insane.
of those shows, and it was like I was a young kid, and I was like, man, this is getting too violent for me. But there was some crazy
That's
stuff
what we
going on
preach.
there.
We preach once.
Of course you did. Yeah.
So then you came up and said, well, you know what, did you have already so much footage, or you said, you know what, we did LA so much justice, let's go and do this for the Bay Area? Because I really dug the way it was from kind of the late 70s and the early, and then they kind of went through the thrash thing, and you
Right.
just kind of went through it all, but it wasn't all, it was Journey was in there, you know what I mean?
yeah.
YT was in there.
Sure. Well, we
Matt
had the whole
Anthony,
story.
bands
Yeah.
like that. I mean, it's
Wow.
like, wow, yeah,
Yeah.
I know. It was like,
yeah, Jimmy
wild.
Arsenault was talking a lot about
Jimmy, yeah,
that.
Jimmy. I seen Jimmy in
he's
there. I was
great.
like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's Jimmy. There's Jimmy. What the fuck? It's like, it was kind of, watching it brought me back down memory lane. So
That's what we wanted. We want to kind of give people a journey back in time into that era. And, you know, people like Jimmy, a club promoter, and, you know, like I said, the record store guys, the labels, they were very instrumental in the scene, you know. And as you know, the record stores were such a huge
yeah,
thing
Ron
back
Quintana's
then.
show, you know what I mean?
Quintana
The
show,
KUSF,
came in
exactly.
and
Rampage
Callan,
Radio.
Rampage Radio.
Exactly. It was
And his
major.
band team,
That's where we
Metal
got played, you know. That's where
Sure.
they played.
And I remember hearing about all that. I was pen pals with Ron, and he would sometimes send me cassette. He would
Yeah,
send
that's
me
how
some
you did
demos,
it.
and
That's
he
how it
would send
was
me cassettes
done.
of the shows.
You
and it's
send
like,
it
wow.
exactly. We would tape them.
Yeah, it's insane.
It was
and it was
funny.
like anything goes. He would have the guy because it was like an overnight show.
Oh
right?
yeah, it came on like at
People
2
would
in the
be
morning, I
drinking
think.
and-
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Who was his friend? Stitch or Skitch?
Yeah,
was
yeah,
on there.
yeah,
It
Skitch,
was
yeah.
pretty wild.
Yeah.
We'd call in and we'd tell him, we'd just say all kinds of shit, and he'd come back. It was great. Ron was a good guy for a scene.
Absolutely, man.
What's next? What are you going to do
I
next?
don't know. We're kind of contemplating. You know, I don't want to give any promises, but obviously, you know, New York would kind of be next in line. But you know, now with everything going on with COVID and everything, it's you know, we'll see what happens. You know, with getting that together. I mean, that's going to obviously be a little bit more of a expense to go out to the New York scene. But I would obviously get someone. I know a few people that were heavy into the New York scene from the early '80s that I could get involved. So and I'd love to obviously get Danny Shipman again to edit. He's done such a fantastic job.
God, there's killer bands from the Rods.
The Rods.
There's bands from New York people don't even know. You know what I mean?
And we would go back to the '70s too. Maybe touch on BOC and Kiss.
Totally. Twisted Sister.
Playing the clubs in
Big
the early
Time,
days.
totally.
Even the Good Rats and the Cities and all these different bands that people, might not remember unless you grew up in New York. But we like to really dig deep and give a lot of the bands props that were huge back then, but never really made it.
Yeah, but I mean, for us, well, not for New York, but I remember bands from your movie, from the documentary, that were huge in the Bay Area, going, oh my God, how come these guys didn't turn into rock stars? You know what I mean? It was pretty crazy, that they and they were big. I mean, there was bands that would sell the Stone out and the Omni, and that's 800-900 people.
Yeah,
and never really got
without
any
a record and
attention.
without
Exactly.
off maybe a demo tape, and it was amazing.
I
that bands could do
Roadrunner,
that.
Roulette, Hans Naughty. I'm like, no way. I remember all these bands.
Yeah, and we really wanted to touch on the glam bands too. We got Vane and we got Head On and Roadrunner and Jet Boy and
Stone Vengeance. He was great.
Mike Coffey's awesome.
Yeah, he's the greatest.
And they've been around too since
for a long time,
late
dude.
70s. Yeah, and unfortunately these bands didn't make it, into the mainstream market anyway, and it's a shame. So we really want to touch on that, and like I said, we want to get a diversity of, there's a lot of progressive band, Anvil Chorus, and all these bands.
Oh yeah,
I remember the scene before Metallica really
Head On. You were talking to Head On. I thought for sure Head On was going to be. I mean, the guitar player looked like Joe Perry. Remember what his name? Frank. Well, yeah, Frankie. Yeah.
He's actually, funny enough, he's in a Aerosmith tribute band called
Of course
Aeromyth.
he is. Of course he is.
But yeah, he was great. I mean, Head On were a big band.
Yes, they were.
Lost Rocket were huge.
Yes, Lost was. People don't realize how big they were.
And so it's fun to kind of go back and and
I remember Moon and Earthquake and all those bands.
Yeah.
I remember them. I was like, because I'm a bit older. I remember 12, 11, 13. I was like, I'd see their flyers going, whoa.
Right. Wow.
How cool would that be? One day I'd have a flyer. Well, hey, man, thank you for coming in. This is awesome.
Absolutely, man.
Again, right here, I'm going to have Wayne put the graphic up. It's the Godfathers of the Bay Area.
Bay Area Godfathers.
Bay Area Godfathers. Right. And you can get this on Amazon, YouTube. You can actually buy
iTunes.
Buy the disc physically, and then I will sign it for you if I see you. Something like that. Any of those. And always help the record stores, and that's kind of. I like to have the physical copies. I like them in my house.
And it's got some good bonus features too.
That's
DVDs,
awesome. That's the greatest part about it. The digipacks are always the best.
Yeah.
So when you get the next one going, I can have you back in?
Absolutely, anytime.
For part 2, we'll do part 2. When
that'll be fantastic.
That's coming out in March, right?
That's coming out in March.
So yeah, so we will get Bob back on here after March, and we will talk about Bay Area Godfathers part 2.
All right, thank you so much.
So then I want all of you guys, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, share this, and leave me some comments. Tell me where you go watch this movie. And then tell me if you remember seeing yourself, because there's tons of killer scenes from back in the day, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. So all of you guys, go check this out. Leave me comments. And for me and Bob, we'll see you back on the vault real soon.
Right on.